Listo, sí señora, ya está grabando.
Perfecto. Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Hoy es 7 de abril, estamos en nuestro octavo conversatorio de formación política y práctica de las lenguas. Este espacio de hoy y esta charla que vamos a compartir se llama Implementing Critical Peace Education, The Experience of an English Teacher in a Rural Area. Nuestra invitada muy especial hoy es Astrid Aristizábal Cardona, ahorita la voy a presentar. Y este es un espacio dentro del programa PIFLE y de la promoción del fomento del plurilingüismo o la estrategia del fomento del plurilingüismo, y surgió como un espacio de formación y conversación propuesto por un grupo de profesores y profesoras de la Escuela de Idiomas el año pasado en el contexto del paro nacional, como una iniciativa para que encontráramos un espacio donde pudiéramos practicar las lenguas, como un espacio de fortalecimiento de las lenguas, pero con un sentido de formación política y crítica. Entonces allí surgió esta serie de conversatorios. Hoy estamos entonces haciendo el octavo y hoy nos acompaña la profesora Astrid Aristizábal Cardona. Voy a hacer la introducción de Astrid en inglés. Astrid Joanna Aristizábal Cardona has been involved in English language teaching for around 7 years. She holds a BA in foreign language teaching and an MA in foreign language teaching and learning, both from our School of Languages at the University of Antioch. At present, she is working at Institución Educativa Técnico Industrial Simona Duque in Marinilla, and also she's one of our professors at the School of Foreign Languages at the university in the program in the teacher education program in foreign language teaching. Her areas of interest include peace education, pedagogy of memory, and critical approaches to language education. So welcome, Astrid. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation. Antes de darte la palabra, Astrid, solo voy a aclarar para todos los y las presentes que como este es un espacio precisamente de práctica y fortalecimiento de las lenguas, la idea es que podamos, luego de escuchar la presentación de Astrid, hacer preguntas, comentarios en la lengua que más nos sintamos cómodos. La presentación de Astrid va a ser en inglés. En cualquier momento que ustedes quieran que ella aclare o repita alguna parte, ella estará dispuesta a hacerlo. Y después de la presentación de Astrid, vamos a empezar esa conversación a través de sus preguntas, como les decía, en la lengua que ustedes quieran. Vamos a estar, si quieren, combinando inglés-español. Si hay algo que no entiendan, siéntanse en la libertad de preguntar, o en otras lenguas, si alguien quiere también hablar en francés. Ahí sí tendríamos que utilizar diferentes, en otras lenguas, alemán, no sé qué otras lenguas hablan ustedes, y buscaremos la manera, si estamos utilizando una lengua que no todos hablan, de combinar con español, que puede ser como la lengua en que coincidamos todos. Entonces le doy la palabra a Astrid. Bienvenida y muchas gracias, Astrid, por aceptar esta invitación.
Bueno, Janet, muchas gracias. Sí, yo también reitero como esa invitación a que hagamos el espacio bien plurilingüe. Por ahí veo también como estudiantes del colegio conectadas que participaron como en algunas de las actividades que yo voy a mencionar ahora. Entonces sé que también como sus comentarios y perspectivas me ayudan mucho a enriquecer este tipo de trabajo que hemos venido haciendo. Okay, so welcome to this conversation. It's called Implementing Critical Peace Education, the Experience of an English Teacher in a Rural Area. It's based also on this study that I conducted at the master's program, and my thesis advisor was Professor Janet Ortiz. So I have to say thank you again, Janet, for these insightful ideas that we discussed together. And this is the agenda for today's conversation. So I plan to start by mentioning some of my personal interests and concerns that, let's say, influence my ideas on this work on peace and violence. Then I would like to move towards this work on critical peace education. I am going to use CPE to refer to critical peace education, both at the level of the English class and also more specifically in public institutions. And later on, we can open up the space for having this conversation, because I'm also interested on knowing your perspectives on this topic, on this presentation, and also the way that you conceive peace as a personal endeavor in your daily life. Concerning my personal concerns on peace and violence, I would like to start by showing this video. It's a documentary called When the Guns Go Silent by Natalia Orozco. And this is also called El Silencio de los Fusiles in Spanish. I think that I have to share this differently so that it works as video clip, right?
And you share the sound as well, Astrid?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is it possible for you to see? Okay, no video clip. Okay, wait a minute, please. Share sound, and that's it. Okay. There you are.
Pero mientras no liberen a los secuestrados, mientras sigan cometiendo actos terroristas, mientras no devuelvan a los niños reclutados a la fuerza, seguiremos enfrentando a todos los violentos sin excepción, con todo lo que esté a nuestro alcance.
Nosotros siempre que nos levantamos de la mesa de conversaciones les hemos dicho, nos vemos dentro de 5.000 muertos.
¿Quién empezó la guerra? ¿Quién es el mayor victimizador? Estado, paramilitares, FARC. Es uno de los conflictos más violentos del mundo. Y eso es lo que tenemos que tener en claro los colombianos.
A uno le pueden pedir que la guerra no mate. Uno puede pedir que la guerra no tire bombas, no ponga minas. Esa es la guerra. Y por eso es que hay que acabar la guerra.
Yo sabía que esa negociación tenía que darse si queríamos realmente terminar el conflicto.
Si aquí este proceso de paz lleva a un sector de los que nos hemos confrontado a la cárcel, aquí no va a haber paz.
Si queremos juzgar los responsables durante 50 años de conflicto, vamos a terminar no juzgando a nadie.
En todo proceso de paz, la decisión más difícil es donde traza uno la línea entre justicia y paz.
Es lamentable todo lo que ha ocurrido. No debió suceder. Solamente quiero decir eso.
En esta guerra de locos estamos todos juntados, ya que unos han sido actores y otros nos hemos callado.
En nombre de las FARC-EP, ofrezco sinceramente perdón a todas las víctimas del conflicto.
4 años grabando un país que se debate entre creer o no creer, mientras enemigos históricos libran la batalla más difícil, la definitiva, la batalla por la paz.
Que este sea el último día de la guerra.
Okay, I think that this video represents how complex this phenomenon is, because you know that there are a lot of causes and consequences coming from this situation of armed conflict. And also because I think that it also represents somehow part of my personal concerns and interest on peace and violence. I'm going to share my presentation again. Okay. And it's widely known that, well, the Colombian government signed this agreement. It was like 5 years ago with the guerrilla group FARC. And this situation raises different concerns about the way education can contribute to peace building in Colombia. And more specifically, I've been interested in how the teaching and learning process of a foreign language can contribute also to social justice and equity in the space of our classrooms. There are also some reflections about the role of mainstream media messages in our country, because we know that this is a country of obliviousness and there is amnesia everywhere. And also because when we are at war, there is also this battlefield where there are opposing narratives about what peace means, what violence means, different interests regarding this issue, and that mainstream media messages may end up like shaping our learners' minds regarding peace and violence in our country. They might be misinforming people. So it's also like this need to embrace this critical analysis on media messages about this particular phenomenon in our country. I can also mention about this, the peace accord. And I think that for me, it's highly important, like to emphasize on this peace accord, because we know that all these killings and disappearance and kidnappings and state absence have made Colombia to become one of the most unequal places on the planet. And we even led the world in terms of like the killings of these defenders of the environment in 2020. So let's say that this peace accord represents hope for many people. And it's like an open window for us to start envisioning at least a different country. And this is also a comprehensive agenda that includes varied requests from different social groups and communities around the country. However, even if this is very important, let's say that its implementation has gone poorly so far. So I am going to show you a little bit of some elements that we need to take into consideration about this peace accord and its implementation. For example, budgets is falling behind, and also this rural reform that is becoming less participatory. Some communities have expressed like this criticism because they feel that they haven't been included in these decision-making processes. This reintegration process is also flawed. It's because I think that we remember that at the very beginning of this implementation, the government was too slow when it comes to the construction of these zonas temporales de desmovilización. And so these ex-combatants, they face different challenges when they had, for example, to find new job opportunities or opportunities to study or to grow their own food. So this was a highly slow process. Also social leaders, we know that they still remain unprotected. And according to some reports provided by Invitada, they say that these homicides, they take place almost every day. So it's unbelievable what is happening with social leaders and human rights defenders here in Colombia. And we can say that making part of social organizations or protesting against injustices or maybe taking place in this social life is becoming risky, and we cannot avoid to feel this fear for our lives. Concerning the ethnic and gender chapters, for example, some analysis say that they are also far from realization, and it's because the government is not providing like enough guarantees for these Afro-descendant and indigenous communities, let's say, to do their cultural practices in their territories to guarantee their lives, and also like the promotion of these initiatives to feel to make women feel included, and LGBTI population is also poor. But okay, there is something positive concerning, for example, this transitional justice process. It has made some progress. I think that we remember Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz, which is like this transitional justice tribunal that is trying to prosecute the most serious human rights offenders or abusers. There is also this Truth Commission that is trying also to unveil all these dynamics behind the armed conflict, and it's also trying to support victims. And there is also this unit to search for disappeared people. And outside verification is also working. We know also that the United Nations verification mission here in Colombia is trying to work towards the protection of human rights defenders and also to guide this disarmament and demobilization process. But if we take a look at what is happening with these councils for peace and reconciliation, we see that they almost never meet. So it's still like raising some questions. We have some questions about it, and we consider that it's fundamental to protect the implementation of this peace accord for many communities in our country. This is a very brief summary of what is happening nowadays with this implementation, but you can check this website that I can share with you later on if you want to get more information about it. Okay. Also, these personal concerns and interests for my position as a foreign language educator come also from this involvement in social organizations. So working with groups of women and young people in preuniversitarios y otras colectivas feministas have made me wonder about how these hard life conditions that they are facing it represents another form of violence, and how this violence may generate even more violence, and this cycle may continue rising more and more. So my question was like, okay, what can I do from my position as an English teacher in my classroom with my students so that I can contribute to peace building, to equity, and to the presence of social justice? And there are also some professional experiences. I've worked with different institutions where they emphasized a lot on this instrumental use of ELT, which is okay because, of course, that we are learning a foreign language, that's right. But we also need to overcome like this role of foreign language teachers as mere technicians of the language that are there in the classroom, just delivering this body of knowledge, this list of vocabulary, or this set of grammar rules. And we need also to start acknowledging how this learning and teaching process is situated in this particular sociopolitical context and what we are doing with the language regarding that. And also, okay, this misinformation phenomenon that I already explained. So what is peace? This is, I think, a fundamental question for this conversation. And perhaps some of you, I don't know if you had the chance to attend the previous conversation with Professor Janet Ortiz. I am sure that she also explained different conceptions around these concepts of peace and violence. But I would like you please to go to this Padlet and write down your comments on what you consider peace and violence in our country. I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to show you how to do this, and you let me know if it works. Share there, this one. You are going to find something like this. There are 3 questions. The first one is, what does peace mean to you? You just click here where it says añadir comentario, and you can write your idea. Click here on this arrow, and there you are. The same with violence and conflict. So I'm going to share with you the link on the chat. And then we can share these perceptions as a whole, okay? I think 3 minutes could be enough for you.
Estamos entonces compartiendo nuestras ideas en el Padlet. sobre 3 preguntas. ¿Qué significa para nosotros la paz? ¿Cómo defino violencia o el concepto de violencia? Y el concepto de conflicto es la tercera. Recuerden que pueden hacerlo en la lengua que quieran. No tiene que ser en inglés. Si quieren contestar en español o en otra lengua. Lo importante es que compartamos nuestras percepciones ahí en el Padlet que nos puso Astrid en el chat.
Si de pronto también hay problemas para escribir allí en el Padlet, en el chat podríamos compartir un poco esas ideas. Ok, Carlos Danilo already shared something. La paz la entiendo como la posibilidad de tener un buen vivir, salud, educación, alimentación, vivienda, tranquilidad. Thank you, Carlos Danilo. Si alguien quiere arriesgarse a hacerlo también de manera oral, bienvenidos, bienvenidas.
Eso iba a decir, que no
Eso.
lo podemos decir si no nos sentimos como para escribir. No queremos escribir, podemos decirlo también.
Ok, Juan Carlos, sobre violencia. Aggressive actions that affect the well-being of any person or group and endangers their patrimony and future. Ok, thank you, Juan Carlos. Okay, feeling free, another definition of peace. I like that one.
Mucho.
Yes.
Esta mañana que en las noticias estaba que están protestando los jóvenes de Quibdó saliendo a las calles por los asesinatos que ha habido. Uno decía eso, es que yo no quiero sentir miedo de salir después de las 6 de la tarde, yo quiero sentirme libre. Todo que ver con lo que escribieron ahí.
Sí, igual creo pues también que con lo que puedo ir compartiendo en la presentación pueden ir surgiendo también como esas inquietudes o nuevas perspectivas también acerca de lo que es la paz, o tal vez nos sintamos un poco más seguras y seguros para compartir esas perspectivas.
Yes.
So I think that we can continue, for example, with these theories that have been very useful for me to understand this complex phenomenon. And I have been using this theoretical framework not only for what I did at the master's program, but also for what I am trying to do at this high school where I'm working right now. And it's these concepts on peace education. Peace education can be understood as an interdisciplinary field that has been enriched by different perspectives along history, and whose main aim in general terms is just okay, try to find this solution to violence, try to prevent the emergence of war. But there are some authors who say, okay, we need also to embrace this critical perspective on peace education. You know, that some of these concepts have been manipulated, have been misused by different people according to their own interests. And you can consider the example of human rights, for example, and different countries have said, okay, we need to invade this city or this country in the name of the human rights. And at the end, what they are actually doing is just to steal their natural resources, for example. So the same may happen with peace. And if we don't embrace this critical peace education, we may end up like causing more harm, okay? And a critical perspective would say that, okay, it's okay, it's right that peace education can help teachers to equip their learners with some skills, some behaviors, or some attitudes. But from a critical perspective, it's also important to analyze that there are like some local situations that may end up, let's say, creating inequality among our students, or local conceptions of what peace and violence mean, some local meanings, some realities that we need also to take into consideration when doing this type of projects, for example. Also from the perspective of peace education, in general terms, they say that violence prevents, this is like a difficulty for human flourishing, which is right, but a critical perspective would say, yes, but there are also some power relationships, and you need to pay attention to that, to what is happening in the structure. And also, peace education scholars say that the school can be a site for transformation. But from a critical perspective, we also need to be aware that the school is placed in this particular sociopolitical context, and that there are larger structures that might be controlling the school. So we need also to become aware of that. It's important also here this concept of transformative agency, which is the way in which we as teachers can engage our students in actions towards peace. And we can consider these actions as small scale actions in the classroom, or perhaps some forms of activism. Yes, it may take different forms. Since this critical perspective on peace education also calls on embracing local meanings, I try also to include pedagogy of memory in this type of studies, because this is a local perspective. This is something that has been developed here in Colombia, and it also gives like prominence to some voices that have been silenced. It's like working towards this never again for anyone. Y yo sé que lo recordamos mucho en estos países del Cono Sur, el nunca más para nadie, which is like avoiding the repetition of the same tragedies. And it also says it's important to pay attention to what the mass media, the messages that they are sending, because they might be manipulating people, and let's say that the versions of our social realities are not as transparent as we may expect. So I am also trying to include these critical views of the media when I try to conduct these projects, because it allows also our students to understand, okay, this is the content that they are trying to show, this is the message, but there are different interpretations from different audiences, and they might be using different techniques, maybe to manipulate some feelings, some emotions, and they pursue some specific interest behind these messages that they are trying to convey. So according to all these lenses, let's say that this is what happens at the level of the English class. Some pedagogical strategies that I use for the implementation of this type of projects, for example, in the case of this master's study, which took place in the Eastern Antioquia, which you know that this is a region that has suffered violence a lot, and maybe the extermination of its civic movement because of these hydroelectric generation processes, and also because of the presence of different armed groups in our territory. I used some strategies coming from pedagogy of memory, which are also interactive techniques from qualitative research in social sciences. They are used in social sciences. You can find some ideas in Centro Nacional de Memoria Histórica, some others proposed by Professor Piedad Ortega, Susana Sacavino. And they include, for example, simple strategies that I am sure that we all have implemented in our lessons, some debates, discussions about objects that elicit people's memories, analysis of photographs, the creation of videos. And the advantage that these strategies provide is that they allow the creation of these spaces for discussions, for dialogue, and also for trying to construct knowledge collectively, taking into account what our students care about. And also the implementation of some pedagogical strategies coming from critical media literacy, which involves, as I already said, like the analysis of mass media. So some key questions have been fundamental here in terms of, for example, who created this message? What is the message that they want to convey? How are these creative techniques trying to influence our minds? And how may different audiences understand this message differently? And what is the purpose that is behind these ideas that they are trying to share with us? So when I implemented these pedagogical strategies, in the case of these student teachers at this public university in the Eastern Antioquia, and when I used also these lenses to understand what was happening with this critical awareness process among my students, I found that this project gave participants the opportunity to develop some analysis of these representations of peace and violence in the conflict of their country. So they started, for example, widening their perceptions of the causes and consequences of the armed conflict. At the end, they didn't say, okay, this is very simple, and this is the single reason that, let's say, caused the emergence of this armed conflict in Colombia. But what they did was just to, let's say, widen these ideas and to start understanding that this is like spider web. This is too complex to be addressed so simply. They also identified like different war agents taking place in this situation of the armed conflict, that they face different challenges, they have different motivations, and also that there are some disenfranchised voices. Some of them have gained like more prominence in detriment of others. And at the end, they became also aware of the purposes of mainstream media, which have to do mainly with businesses or profit making. So this is what happened with Felipe. I'm going to briefly show you what happened with Felipe. It was a very interesting student. He was studying to become a foreign language teacher because he considered that he was good at explaining things to other people, and also he enjoyed learning foreign languages. He, let's say, was indirectly affected by the armed conflict in Colombia, and he was informed about the reality of his country through mass media. So at the beginning, he said, for example, when I asked him about his experiences or his ideas about the armed conflict in Colombia, he referred mainly to illegal businesses. This is like one of the reasons of this conflict. And he also mentioned kidnappings, destruction, murders, and fear. So here we have to analyze and to remember that if we are embracing a critical perspective on peace education, we need to understand that there are different forms of violence. And it is not only about direct violence, which is visible in the form of what Felipe is mentioning here, bombs and murders and killings, but there is also structural violence, for example, the lack of well-being for people, or what Danilo was mentioning before in this Padlet, like the presence of social justice, the guarantee of our human rights. And there is also cultural violence, so which is also difficult to unveil and to notice on our daily basis because it's hidden in art and religion, language, and it also may end up like legitimizing the use of direct violence. For example, when we represent women as fragile or silly, these ideas that are there are legitimizing, for example, that women cannot take part in decision-making positions, for example. Okay, so I can consider that Felipe at the very beginning disregarded some structural causes of the armed conflict. He gave like this very simple explanation, and when in one of our classes, I asked my students to analyze these photographs representing different war agents and to respond to this with these bubbles, he said that the armed forces, they weren't like fulfilling with these ethical duties that they have, that they are not doing the things in the right way, that the guerrilla members were abusing women all the time. So he's also representing war agents as totally bad, totally good, and he is maybe neglecting that they may have these different ideologies or motivations or difficulties also when taking part in this armed conflict. But along the development of the unit, for example, we can start noticing some changes in Felipe's perceptions. He started, for example, when we invited one victim of the conflict to one of our classes, he asked this question about, I would like to know whether the government is supporting your organization or not. He also mentioned the FARC as having an ideology, and he mentioned that there were some other armed groups, that, for example, the peace agreement was not enough for some communities, some people who were displaced, and when they got to a different place, now the conflict was also present. So I think that along the development of this project, he started identifying these different responsibilities, these different purposes coming from war agents, and maybe addressing some causes of the armed conflict. At the end of this project, for example, he said, okay, I want to design a video, because I asked my students to design like a final product that could be a podcast, a video. And he said, I want to design a video that represents the voices and the lifestyles and the opinions of peasants, rural teachers, because I consider that they haven't been, let's say, listened to enough, and that I think that Felipe was also aware here that he was omitting some points of view. For example, he mentioned the points of view of children or young people who grew up in the middle of the armed conflict, but he wanted to give prominence to peasants and rural teachers, their struggle, their resistance in the armed conflict. And the title he gave was, It's Time to Remember, as if it, let's say, as if he considered important the recovery of our memory too. And also, when he was asked about new war agents that he could identify involved in these dynamics of the armed conflict, he mentioned a wide array of people, of groups, armed groups, political forces that create polarization, even Colombian people who look indifferent towards what is happening in Colombia, or countries around the world whose decisions may influence what happened here, among others. So we can see here that at the end, he developed this independent position about what happened with the armed conflict in our country. He recognized several war agents. He increased his interest in the victims and criticized the role of the official media. I remember that he mentioned one TV show that was apparently very reliable, but now he said that he didn't trust this program anymore, and that we needed to like double check information because they were manipulating some data. So it was interesting to see this transformation in Felipe. Now, when it comes to implement this type of projects or studies, for example, at a public high school in the Eastern Antioquia, there are some different challenges. And what I try to do is, of course, take into account what I already mentioned, these different conceptions of peace and violence, and also like considering that the students' voices is also relevant for what we are going to be doing with these pedagogical projects. And yes, because I think that I focused on this project, I focus too much on the armed conflict, but we can also open up like these concepts of peace and violence and start addressing some other issues that have to do with, let's say, violence that we may encounter on our daily basis, which are, of course, harder to unveil. But anyways, what I try to do with my students at this public high school has to do with, okay, try to develop these pedagogical units about peace and violence in their local contexts. So I always try to depart from what is important for my students or from what is happening in their immediate surroundings. And they also have this opportunity to create their own counter texts, which means like they analyze what is presented in real life, they analyze what is presented in the mass media, and they, let's say, create these alternative messages. And they also, of course, that we need to focus on the development of these 4 linguistic skills. I have still to rely on this suggested curriculum, both by the institution, by the Ministry of Education. So we have to present lists of vocabularies, we have to explain grammar structures, etc. And there is also this promotion of spaces for critical reflection. We need to consider that our students have different linguistic levels, of course, but so that is why I consider important also like to have Spanish as another option for our students in the English class. Then they also have, or I try to give them this possibility of using this range of semiotic and representational resources, which means like not conceiving a communication as just speaking English as a native speaker, but also you can use Spanish, students can draw, they can design some memes, some TikToks, they also write some poems. And this is the way that they convey meaning and that they create their counter texts. And this is also something that I try to become as an opportunity for students to do research, to seek answers, to imagine better places to live, to ask questions and to problematize what is happening around them. For example, why is this happening? Who is responsible for this? Can we do something about it or not? Can we come up with some alternative solutions to this problem? Which is highly interesting because students can come up with very creative ideas. Last year, for example, I proposed some of these activities to my 11th grade students on how to be a good citizen, on some situations related to the armed conflict in Colombia. So I asked some questions about the importance of being informed, listen to the radio, or why is it important to be a good citizen, and also their opinions about what being a good citizen means here in Colombia. Also, like trying to build up vocabulary beforehand in terms of basic human needs and basic human rights, and discussing, do you think we all have the right to these basic human needs? Do some people have more rights than others? What rights do you have? Or mention some rights that you consider are constantly violated in Colombia. They also watched some videos about, for example, communities that have been displaced here in Colombia, such as in San Jose de Apartado. And some of these answers that my students wrote was the right to life is easy but painful to explain. This is something that we see every day in politics, people who hold like different ideologies and try to fight for their rights. They are being murdered, and they started like connecting what we were discussing in this project with what was happening at that moment, which was this Colombia's national strike that was triggered by this tax reform. And also they responded, for example, about this question, do some people have more rights than others? Yes, some people have some privileges, they live in favorable places, they have like better life conditions, they come from rich families. So they also started identifying like some structural issues related to the armed conflict, and to understand that there are like power relationships that we need to pay attention to when discussing these issues. I gave them also this opportunity to design like a brochure. Okay, let's weigh of some 5 alternative solutions to violence. If you were the Colombian president right now, what would you do? What would you propose? And something that caught my attention is that they also overcame like this very simple explanation of peace as the absence of the armed conflict, and they went beyond that. They tried to consider peace as a more holistic thing, because they mentioned, for example, education, technology, also to educate people and to live in harmony, also to support peasants and to provide guarantees for education, like better education opportunities, provide maybe return lands, provide, for example, psychological support for the victims of violence. So it was interesting to see, for example, how they created these counter messages, counter texts. And they also even took part in some forms of activism. I am not saying that this is due to the implementation of this project in the English class, but it's interesting to see how our students, let's say, make their own decisions. They can also reflect on what is happening in their immediate context, and they reflect on what they can do. They say, yes, we need to change this situation and we can do something about it. And in this was also like an invitation to take part in this cultural performance, of course, in the context of this national strike. So yes, it's nice to see this, that our students are not these empty vessels, but that they care for what is important for them. This was what happened with 11th grade students. Now this year with 7th grade students, I also proposed them to start paying attention to something that they would like to change when it comes to talk about their school. And as a teacher, I was expecting my students to, let's say, express some concerns about sexual harassment, which is something very serious that is taking place in our school at this moment. But what I found out at the end is that my students are more concerned about situations of bullying, or maybe some violent reactions from the part of some of their teachers, or maybe not having enough money to buy some candies in the cafeteria, or maybe they are worried about getting bad grades. And it's because we know that this school is highly focused on these academic aspects. They also have this opportunity. These are like some of the activities that I have been proposing, to write their own I wish poem. So in terms of their life in school, and complete these spaces with their own ideas. I wish that this school we had, my classmates would, the teachers, the principal, that I could do this, or that I could be this other thing. And we are also planning to do like this cartografía social, which is another interactive technique coming from social sciences, where we are going to walk the school and mark some places that make us feel happy, secure, and safe, and try to find out like some problematic situations that we need to address in our school. One of our students also from this Licenciatura program, he did something similar with some graffiti, for example, and they found out that there were a lot of violent messages against people coming from Venezuela, or against women, or young students and classmates having these suicidal thoughts. And at the end, they are expected to create like their own dream school. So the way they conceive their school in terms of size, activities that they can do, the subjects that they would like to study, the facilities at this school, initiatives to take care of this school also, where your school will be located, schedule for their school, and to create them up, of course, at the end. From these activities, there are like some preliminary, let's say, creations from my students. They are worried, for example, about classmates disrespecting them, or about, yes, bullying, as I already mentioned. And I think that this is also like a proof of how we as foreign language teachers need to continue overcoming this idea of teachers as mere technicians of the language, because notice how language has this potential to reflect on our own realities, to denounce injustice, to get to know our students' concerns, and to make them reflect on some possibilities to change these realities. And also, of course, to to work towards peace building. Okay, and that's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Astrid. It's very, very, enriching, eye-opening to see all these examples from your work, to see you're so convinced and so enthusiastic about, making changes at the school where you work, from your own principles and from the knowledge you have developed during these years with your work with your students, because I know you and you always value what you get from your students as well and get more ideas from them. It's not only about the academia. I can tell, because I know you, that this is not only like a professional thing, but it's also that permeates who you are, and it shows in what you have shared with us today. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to open the space for a conversation, because I guess there are many questions or comments that our attendants would like to make. Vamos a abrir entonces el espacio de conversación para que todos los asistentes puedan hacer sus preguntas o inclusive decir sus propias ideas, reacciones. Es un espacio de conversación libre, entonces no hay como formato. Entonces yo creo que podemos escuchar o preguntas iniciales o comentarios, reacciones, que nos pareció lo que nos acaba de compartir Astrid, y también cosas que de pronto quisiéramos que ella elaborara más, quisiéramos entender, o que quisiéramos que nos cuente un poquito en español, que también puede ser la idea, o expresar. Entonces les doy la palabra a quien quisiera. Pueden simplemente hablar, activar su micrófono y empezar, o alzan la mano si quieren, como quieran. Por aquí escribe en el chat Juan Carlos, thanks a lot for sharing with us your experience. I would like to know what resistance coming from students or parents or other students have you, from your students, parents, or other students have you experienced? What kind of resistance, and what have you done, Astrid? Okay, Juan Carlos, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yes, so only a correction. First of all, Astrid, thank you very much. Very insightful. I think it's a very hard work what you are doing there, but it wasn't other students, it was other teachers.
Okay.
So what resistance from students, because I suppose that is the first group of people, agents that you are working with, but also from other teachers. I don't know how involved they are, or if parents are as well involved, and what have you done?
Well, I think that from the part of both parents and students, it's more like some questions about, okay, how is this related to the English class? Is this a social science class, ethical class, etc.? And also at the end, when it comes to, for them to do these final tests that they call pruebas de periodo, teacher, but what are we going to do? What are you going to be asking about? If we have discussed a lot of issues, we did this and this. How are going to be structured the questions? And it's hard because you know that these are standardized tests. But anyways, that is why we also have to open this space for working towards grammar and vocabulary, and also without risking these spaces for reflection. From the part of teachers, it's even harder because we aren't used to work or to integrate these topics in our lessons. And they start asking questions such as, okay, that's interesting, but you are putting the learning process of your students at risk because you are not going to find enough material in English. This is everything in Spanish. Or yes, our students are not going to have enough linguistic level to participate in these discussions. And it's because we still have this idea that, for example, Spanish might not be welcomed in our classes, or that we cannot work together, for example, to design materials as a team in English to reflect on our own social reality. So it requires also try to be very persuasive with these teachers, and also trying to show them like these possibilities, that this is easy to do. It's something that our students can do, that they can enjoy also. And I think that, yes, it's like having this attitude in general terms, and also acknowledging that this is also present in what the curriculum proposes. If you take a look at, for example, what the suggested curriculum and basic learning rights contain, one of the purposes is working towards the construction of peace. So it's not like Astrid is overreacting, or she is doing something different, but this is what we are also required to do. It makes part also of our language policies. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. The suggested curriculum has a part that is global citizenship.
Yes.
Yes, totally. It's a very good answer. So we have these general goals, objectives, I think that they are called general objectives, and cross-curricular topics, and it's a good defense for a teacher to bring in the national policies. And I think that your students are very smart when they ask you, hey, and what are you gonna evaluate? What is the criteria for the evaluation? And this is the question that I want to ask, but maybe somebody else wants to participate. But my question will be, so what do you evaluate? Are you focused on the language after all the work, or do you really have criteria or a criterion for social awareness or peace building or peacemaking?
Yes, well, apart from this standardized test, which is of course mandated by the institution, and they have their own criteria that I have to follow strictly because they check all this, I have to ask these questions like A, B, C, D, closed-ended questions. Yes, based on grammar, vocabulary, and also reading comprehension. It's like the space that I can take advantage of for us to remember some ideas about peace education, peace building, or for example, these cases of bullying or the situation of the armed conflict in Colombia. So that's what I do concerning this final test. And the rest of the assessment, let's say that I can be more flexible, more autonomous, so I can assess, for example, my students' participation, their own self-assessment, and also like let's say their reflection in general terms. Okay, we are going to do this graphic representation of what is taking place in our schools, and I have to value what they are doing over there. Let's say that I am not punishing like grammar mistakes or pronunciation mistakes, but I am just trying to explore what they think. And this is like a more flexible section of the assessment component. Okay. Marta says that she has to leave.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Thank you, Marta.
Podemos hacer comentarios, hacer más preguntas. Yo tenía una pregunta relacionada con la de Juan, la voy a ir haciendo mientras alguien más se atreve.
Okay.
Astrid, are you working on this, like towards peace education independently? Have other teachers joined you? Do you have the school support? Because one of the most challenging things for teachers in schools, when undertaking something different, something that is not, mandatory, and that you're doing out of your own enthusiasm and conviction. It's being able to do it and finding like a team or somebody to work with, because of course you can do many things on your own. That's always possible when you're willing to, but things can have a greater impact when you work together. And I think that the idea of peace education is also, getting more people on board, because we need this kind of projects to to have a bigger impact. We need more people joining in. So what has been your experience in that sense?
It's been a difficult experience, and now I can consider myself like isolated because I am in charge, for example, of 7th grade students, and it's only me. When I share this level, for example, with other English teachers, it's easier for us to work together. But this year, this is like something that is happening right now. So I have been working with these teachers of Cátedra de la Paz, because I also have to teach Cátedra de la Paz, and it's easier to work with them towards peace, of course, because we have to discuss this issue. It's like more natural, and they are open to receive like these new ideas and to work from these students' concerns, and also to get them involved in the creation of these counter texts, and they enjoy doing this. Last year, when I was working with 11th grade students and 9th grade students, I was working with one student coming from the Licenciatura program, and of course that they are also open to receive these ideas and to work hand in hand with me, so that we can like promote peace education in our classroom, so it was easier. For other teachers who are working with different students, I have shared some materials, I have given like some suggestions and some ideas, but I am not sure about what they are doing in their classrooms so far. I don't know. We need to get together again in these reuniones de área, that's what they call, in order to see, for example, how they are doing with 10th grade students, where it's easier for them to implement this or not. And what else? Yes, I think that in general terms, it has been, I know that this requires these systematic works, because if we are doing like these single projects, mini projects or units isolated from the rest of the school community, it's even harder. But yes, this is what we are doing little by little.
Thank you, Astrid. Yes, little by little, and you have to start, you know, with your own classroom, and then see if somebody else wants to join. Thank you so much, Astrid. Astrid, tú dijiste que había algunos de tus estudiantes acá todavía están. De pronto, si ellos se atreven a contarnos qué han pensado de las actividades que has hecho con ellos en español. No sé, si los quieres invitar, qué bueno escucharlos, porque no siempre tenemos esa oportunidad de hablar de un proyecto, de un profe y tener algunos estudiantes acá. Qué bueno poderlos escuchar.
Qué rico, si Juanita de pronto se anima, que fue una de mis estudiantes en 11 el año pasado. Hola Juanita, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien por aquí. Voy a intentar usar el Spanglish.
Está bien.
Ahora no tengo pues como el nivel. Okay. My teacher Astrid was a important person for my development in the school. Yes, because I always felt like in the school was the board topics and the como, o sea, yo me sentía reaburrísima porque sentía que no aprendía nada importante que me pudiera servir para el futuro, ¿cierto? So when my teacher arrived with these different topics and important things that yo venía pensando y sintiendo últimamente, porque por lo del paro sobre todo, que llegó como a todas partes de Colombia, y por más pequeño que uno fuera, por más joven que uno fuera, uno también estaba muy informado. Entonces, en ese momento, cuando la profe también nos estaba hablando mucho sobre, recuerdo un tema muy importante y que para mí fue muy grateful, que fue lo de la identidad de género. Entonces para mí fue como, wow, I can speak about this in English. So was like una puerta que se me abrió así súper. Entonces sí fue muy chévere.
Gracias, Juanita, por
Muchas
compartir eso con
gracias,
nosotros.
Juanita. Juanita es muy modesta porque ella ya expresa sus ideas en inglés súper bien. Muchas gracias, Juanita, por darnos tu visión. Qué bueno, qué motivante. Thank you very
Sí,
much.
hubo una parte donde trabajamos como esos beauty standards in the media, con perspectiva de género, y los análisis iban muy orientados a eso que menciona Juanita, como todas esos estándares que nos imponen, sobre todo a la población femenina, entonces está lastimando un poco la autoestima, ellas en su edad también, adolescentes un poco vulnerables frente a todos esos mensajes, atentando de pronto contra su propia salud y su amor propio, entonces creo que de pronto sí generó tal vez ese tipo de reacciones que uno en ese momento tal vez no alcanza a dimensionar, pero ahora que Juanita lo menciona, por ejemplo, fue ese un tema relevante para ella, y que sé también que en medio de lo del paro, pues de este tipo de violencias que particularmente se cometían contra mujeres, y que hubo casos muy serios de abuso contra mujeres, pues generó también esa indignación en las estudiantes y ellas mismas convocan, pues del colegio donde yo trabajo y otros colegios, a una marcha, a un performance también cultural en el parque del municipio, a hacer un llamado a la policía también a respetar los cuerpos de las mujeres y que no sean tomados como botines de guerra. Fueron entrevistadas también por el canal comunitario del municipio, entonces tuvieron oportunidad también de hacer escuchar allí su voz, de analizar lo que estaba pasando, de decir, bueno, tomemos acción, hagamos algo frente a esto. Y fueron iniciativas totalmente juveniles, de estudiantes de colegio. Muy bien.
Thank you very much, Astrid. I think that is a great point to make a connection with what peace is about. Like, peace is not only about the armed conflict, but it's about the relations we construct with everyone around us and the relations between women and men. And actually, feminism has made a great contribution to peace education as well. Like, when saying like peace is constructed behind every single door in the relation between every single woman and man, you see, and between women and men. Those equal relations that we build with between women and men make part of the construction of peace, and are part of what we should envision as having peaceful environments. Thank you so much. That is very, very meaningful for all of us. I would like to invite other attendees to say their ideas. Juan Sebastián, welcome.
Hola.
Hola.
Hola, Astrid, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Sebas, ¿qué tal? Bien.
Bien. Sí, ¿me recuerdas?
Claro, está hablándonos desde Argentina, desde Colombia, desde
No, desde
cualquier rincón
Colombia.
del mundo. Súper.
Desde acá en Colombia. Bueno, Astrid, bueno, yo estudié con Astrid cuando Astrid era de la escuela, era una estudiante, era de las mejores, yo era de los vagos, y bueno. Bueno, I would like to ask you if, well, the topics that you are teaching at school, I think are difficult topics. I mean, those are topics which are many debates in real life. Have you had problems with others? I mean, people which is not involved in the school in the way that, for example, armed conflict, people which is in favor of the plebiscito. Many people think that we are on the left side of politics, or we are in favor of guerrilla. Maybe other people which is against of plebiscito are paracos, or are in favor of Uribe. So if you are, I think you are teaching some to the students that they could have a critical position on both sides. But I think many people could see you that you are influenced to your children, maybe the left side, or maybe the feminism, or maybe those kind of, have you had problems with outside of school?
Well, you are right about that. When I worked with these university students, it was easier. I think that dealing with this type of topics at the university is easier because people are like tend to be more open-minded, and these ideas are, in general terms, they are welcome. Okay. The level of the school, yeah, sometimes it's like, okay, this is strange, but I haven't gotten like any negative comment from the part of my school community either. On the street, it's a normal situation, like to receive this type of comments. Are you a guerrilla member, or you are leftists? Or yes, those teachers from FECODE es como lo más común. Those teachers from FECODE, FARCODE, you are indoctrinating your students, you are inoculating these ideas. And that is why I always try, Sebas, like to depart from my own students' ideas, like not to impose what I consider is important for them, but that they can give me like these starting points for me to develop these pedagogical projects. For example, this is one of the strategies that I use to avoid falling into this situation. And I have to mention what Professor Sara Fernandez said also. She's a professor from our university, and I'm quoting her in Spanish. Yo no puedo ser una profesora que está simplemente allí educando en conocimientos, en saberes, sino también formando ciudadanamente. Y que estamos en el aula como abriendo el crisol de esas posibilidades, no para imponer y adoctrinar, sino para formar criterio. It's like giving your students the possibilities to envision different worlds, and also like to try to make informed decisions. I am not telling them what to think, or if they disagree with my ideas, I don't punish them, or I don't tell them what to think, what to say, what to do, but it's like a matter of, okay, let's open the space for discussion, let's ask more questions about this topic, or let's look for more information about what you are mentioning, so that we can start like this, making these informed decisions. But I think that, yes, we can try to look for different strategies so we don't end up like imposing ideas. It's like what Paulo Freire also said. We need to work with these communities' demands and requests, and try to find like these generative themes, so that we are not imposing what we as researchers or teachers consider as important for our own learners. But it's a danger, Sebas. You know how Colombia is. There goes the feminist teacher, the feminazi, there goes the leftist teacher. Yes, it makes part of this.
Okay. But you enjoyed, or maybe are you fear?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
This year, for example, no, last year.
Because you are kind of a social leader. I think so.
I still take part in some social organizations in my hometown. But I haven't gotten like this direct threats or something, just comments maybe, or in general terms in the social networks, which is a very common phenomenon, but not against me. No, not yet. I hope so. Yeah.
You got Danilo that defends you.
Yes, they know that I am with Danilo, so my bodyguard.
Exactly.
Thank
Okay,
you
thanks.
very much, Sebastian. Thank you. Okay, so who else would like to make a comment? or question. We still have like 11 minutes for conversation.
Okay.
So feel free.
Teacher, hello, teacher, hello guys.
Hello.
I only can say a congratulations for the teacher Astrid. It's a interesting topic and is a different form and teach. Today is difficult speak around the piece. Is a topic. I don't know, the people they can't speak around the topic, and the teacher or professor can teach teach the topic and the different forms and sports and science. In this case, for English, for me is very different and appropriated. And no more. I can learn different expression and different topic around the English, because I can speak and I can travel another countries, but try speak around this topic is interesting for open the mind. Is very interesting. I am happy for share. Excuse me, for listening the teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisette. Yes, you are right about what you are saying. At the beginning, I was, let's say, somehow hesitant about doing this because of some of these comments, like, how is this useful for the English class? What are you going to do with your students? What pedagogical strategies are we going to implement? It's beautiful when we talk about it, but when it comes to do this in your classroom, is it easy? Does it represent a lot of challenges? And yes, I was like hesitant, but at the same time, I felt passionate about the topic. So I said, if I am going to undertake this, I have to do something that I really enjoy and that I consider valuable, and that I say that it's like worth it to do. Okay, what else am I doing with the language in the classroom? And what else are my students going to do with this? And how am I going to do this meaningful for them? So I said, yes, I have to go on. And also, like, it was difficult for me to start embracing like local perspectives, because okay, Colombian authors and doing this pedagogy of memory, am I forcing these things? But it was absolutely pertinent. I think it was necessary, and pedagogy of memory was like very useful for my studies. It has given me a lot of ideas, not only theories, but also practical ideas of how to deal with these situations in my classroom. And thank you for also acknowledging this, Lisette.
Thank you very much, Astrid and Lisette, for that interesting comment and question. I would like to add something there. And I think Juanita also mentioned it, like talking about peace construction or peace building and peace education, it's talking about ourselves. And it's talking about who we are and how we relate to others and how we can improve that relation to others. So this is not like an alien topic to anyone. It's not like something that is external to us, and that is what we tend to believe. And actually this morning when I was watching the news reports, and they were talking about the Embera community protesting in downtown Bogota, and you know, all of the like the confrontation with the police, and people were hurt and so on. And of course, the media tends to focus on one side of the story, but the side of the Envera people and why they were protesting after being in Bogota for so long and not having their problems solved. They interviewed like the owner of a business, the owner of a shop that had been attacked by like in that protest, and he said something that got me thinking about what we're saying today. He said, I don't know why they did this to us. We don't have anything to do with this problem. Like, I don't understand why. And you know, that tells a lot about the lack of education that we have, or the kind of education that we have that doesn't teach us about ourselves, about our roots, about our indigenous communities, or about our Afro-Colombian communities, and what the historic relations that we have built, the unequal historic relations that we have built, and why for example, indigenous people have the problems they have today that should be our problems as well. And so that tells a lot about the kind of education we haven't had. So that's why I also find so significant what Astrid is doing with her students, not only at the university, but also at school, because we need to talk about these things in school. We need to talk about not only like how we relate individual to individual, but how we have related and built those relations between different groups in Colombia, and how what we do and what we think about others tend to perpetuate that stigmatization and labeling of people, and consequent violence against groups and against individuals representing specific groups. So that's absolutely, you know, what you're saying, it's absolutely true. What Juanita and Lisa mentioned, it's like, this is about who we are and how we relate to others. Absolutely.
Yes, Janet, you made me remember a conversation with the students from Cátedra de la Paz, in which I explained how, for example, the way our territory is designed, it might be discriminatory against some people, for example, with disabled people, people who are handicapped people. And one of the students said, okay, so what are you expecting? That we have to rebuild our cities and our towns just because these people need to walk the streets? And all of his classmates were like, yes, or at least we need to try to find some alternative solutions. What if we make some adaptations to the way these cities are built? You need to think differently. Why are you so close-minded? And sometimes they get like exasperated, but yes, they emerge like these interesting conversations about the way our students are conceiving their world, or the spaces that they live in. And that is why I am referring that I am not trying to impose my opinions, but they themselves are trying to, okay, let's consider this from a different point of view. Okay, I haven't thought of that before. I am sorry if I was discriminating these people. Yes, they start becoming aware of different situations. It's interesting to see this.
And that is very valuable learning. You see, like,
yes.
like learning to see different perspectives, learning to find solid arguments, to take a stance, and to, you know, be clear in your explanations, but with arguments, not only like just opinions. That also makes part of that development of criticality and critical thinking, and so I would say fundamental for critical peace education, right? Okay. I don't know if anyone else wants to make a final comment or question. ¿Quién más le gustaría participar para que vayamos cerrando?
Just with that last comment that Astrid made, you don't need to be handicapped to suffer the bad infrastructure that we have in our cities or towns. I just want a sprained ankle for a couple of weeks, and I suffer. I had never paid attention to how bad our streets are, and I suffered to move around the city a lot. I was scared, and I was hurting myself every time that I was moving around because of my sprained ankle. And my point is that there are many situations, I think it's difficult, but we can give it a thought in which we can put people in situations or ourselves as well in situations to raise some empathy for the issues that we bring into the class. So I was not handicapped, but I was hurt. My ankle was, hurting because sports or whatever. And I realized, well, how are people who live this every day in their whole life? So, and not only that, with violence against women, how do you will feel if you are in that situation, even if you are a man? No, that's it.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Yes, it's a matter of showing empathy towards other people's needs and concerns. Totally.
In one of the posters that you showed, like there were a group of women saying peace is about social justice, you see?
Yes.
And social justice entails all of this. It's not the absence of war. It's like equity among women and men, people with different physical conditions, people from different ethnicities, how we can have equal opportunities of access, of education, good living conditions. So it's about, and as Danilo also mentioned it, like having a good life, the good life that indigenous people talk about. El buen vivir. It's about el buen vivir that they also connect. And you have also talked about this, Astrid, in other spaces. And we mentioned it in the last conversation as well. It's not only about peace education, it's also about living in harmony with the natural world around us, with the environment. And we know that war has to do with the exploitation of natural resources. So peace entails that, not only living in harmony with other humans, but with our natural surroundings. Okay. Well, I don't know if there is any final comment or question.
Janet, I just want to say that, to congratulate Astrid, because I have been a witness in this process, and I know that it is not easy, right? Considering, for example, working in high school, because it will be easier, for example, looking or finding a workshop on internet to teach, I don't know, present simple, simple past, and give them the photocopies. But preparing that kind of activities, thinking how to create, adapt, or propose activities to implement or to apply what she has studied about peace education. It's time consuming, right? Time demanding. And yeah, I think that it's also a really nice job to give students the possibility to express themselves, right? To let them think about, those topics, and to give them a message like that they are valuable and that they have like really nice things to say, right? And to think about their own challenges and the topics that they are like, or things that they are experiencing, right? Because sometimes, I have some of the activities, and sometimes we have planned lessons to implement, for example, in her school and my school, the school where I work, and it's difficult because I mean to promote those debates, because sometimes they don't want to use English, sometimes students they don't want to participate. So I just want to congratulate Astrid because I know this is a hard work. Okay.
Thank you, Danilo. I also have to say thank you because you have also given me very useful ideas. You have been patient with all this. And I also know that you are trying to make difference in your classroom too. Thank you very much.
Danilo, you have to be one of our guests in another space because you have a lot of things to tell us as well.
Yes, please.
Okay, of course.
I'll be inviting you to a future talk, okay? So you share your experience as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Astrid, as Danilo said, this takes a lot of courage, right? It's absolutely challenging to do this in any context, but in a public school, I think it's an additional challenge. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, for opening this conversation space with us. I would like to thank your students as well, Danilo and everyone who was here today. I invite you to complete the evaluation form of the event. Por favor, está el link en el chat para que hagan la evaluación del evento. También es muy importante este formato para nosotros tener registro de la asistencia, seguir abriendo el espacio. So thank you everyone, and we'll be inviting you to the next space as you receive information from Multilingua and Fomento del Plurilingüismo. Astrid, thank you very much again, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Janet. Bye.
Thank you, Danilo. Nice to hear you.
Same here.
Astrid's bodyguard.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
He said bye-bye. Thank you.